Security VIP is the official podcast of the security industry, from manufacturers to end users and everything in between. Security VIP is your home for nothing but the truth.
You think you know me?
On this day, I see clear. You're listening to the Security VIP Podcast, hosted by Taylor May, the official podcast of the security industry and home of nothing but the truth.
What's up, guys? Taylor May here, owner and host of the Security VIP Podcast. Going to be changing it up a little bit differently today. Normally, I have a guest or VIP guest on an episode, but today it's just going to be solo. Haven't done a solo episode, just myself, in a while. Good time for me to kind of reflect and kind of push the reset button on how I do my podcast moving forward. I'm still going to feature industry professionals as well as guests and kind of key customers on my podcast, but I'm going to start talking about topics that are more passionate topics of mine, topics that sit close to me, that I believe in strongly, and kind of where I see the industry heading, if not already headed in the industry, that in the way that I think it is. I'm on episode. This is episode 15. For those driving on the road, for those watching online, I'm going to share my screen here in a second to talk about what we're going to be speaking with. But for those that are interested in partnering with me or having their company featured on an episode of my podcast series, feel free to email me at info@securityvip.net, info@securityvip.net. I post all my episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So enough of that. Let's talk about the important stuff, right? So I called this episode Dinosaurs in Security. It's Dinosaurs in the Security Industry. Now, I can't take credit for the name. I was going to call this episode actually something different. I was going to call it Order versus Complexity in the Security Industry. But after a recent poll published by IPVM and a discussion with John Hanovich, I am now going to call this episode Dinosaurs in the Security Industry. So I have to give credit where credit's due. That was John Hanovich, his recommendation. So I'm taking that and I'm going to run with it. So what I want to talk about is kind of the poll first. I'm going to share my screen and obviously share the poll that I am talking about. All right, IPVM's page. Scroll down to the poll. For those listening in online, the poll says, what do you think of subscription-based physical security systems versus conventional non-subscription systems? Right now, there's about 460 votes. 36% of the votes, people say they like them. 31% of people say they're neutral about them. And there's 33% of people out there in the votes that say that they do not like the subscription-based physical security systems. Now, we're only a day into this poll, so the story is still to be told by the end of the week. So we'll see where this ends up following. But I believe in this topic. It was a really good poll, by the way. IPM does some really good polls, so I got to give a shout out to John. It's good because it creates dialogue, gets people thinking, kind of where the industry's heading. So which is kind of what IPM's all about, which I think is pretty cool. So this topic kind of speaks volumes to me because I work for an AI emerging technology company, right? So ZeroWise is my full-time employer. We do weapon detection. And with that, with ZeroWise, we have a SaaS or annual recurring revenue model, ARR model, just like most emerging technology companies in this sector. And so I made a couple comments on that poll, saying, hey, this is the future of the industry. I strongly believe that the shift has already happened. Manufacturers are already incorporating this model. If not, they are planning to adopt it sooner than later. And we're going to see more of it, right? I think we're going to see more subscription-based models, just like everything else on the planet, right? I mean, you have a subscription-based model for Spotify, you have it for Netflix, you have it for iTunes. I mean, every kind of Amazon. I mean, any kind of model nowadays always is built into some kind of SaaS or subscription license-based model. I mean, it's just kind of where we are, right? So And I think why people oppose that model, and this is just my opinion, and this is what I commented on that poll, as I said, I think the biggest hiccup, at least in the security industry, when it comes to manufacturers providing a SaaS or reoccurring revenue model or ARR model, is you have old school mentality and dinosaur generation people in this space, hence the word dinosaurs in the security industry. And what I consider a dinosaur is a 20 plus year old veteran that has seen the shift. A lot of shifts happen here in the industry. Everything from the analog to IP age, the digital IP age, to the WEGAN, to the OSDP age with access control, to the emerging tech space now that we're here with, which is present, which we're in now right now. So I consider these guys obviously veterans of the space, but subsector of that is some of these guys are dinosaurs. This is not like an insult or meant to offend anyone, but the reason why I think SaaS models have been difficult to portray to the customers is because some of these legacy guys are resistant to change. Hence the word order. And I'll talk about order here in a second. But this is the thing, man. This is the thing about kind of how things evolve and change. If you're in that mindset of, well, we've always done it this way, or that's how it's always been, that is a big sign that change has to happen or something should happen. And when I refer to the term dinosaur, this is mainly factoring integrators or channel partners or dealers that kind of fall into that line. What are integrators used to? What is the traditional value that an integrator offers? They offer their expertise around camera systems. They deploy cabling. They deploy that box sale, right? So it's the cameras, the VMS, the access control, XYZ. Then they lock their customers into a 3-year or 5-year term, MSA, ELA, Master Service Agreement, etc. Well, some of those integrators that have been around for 20 plus years or 30 plus years or 50 plus years or whatever it may be, have these legacy guys into them that have these old school mentalities about, well, this is what it's always has been. I'm not going to change. This is what works. Why would I ever incorporate that, etc. Now, I'm not saying all these guys are like this, but some are like this. They're stuck in order. They don't want to throw in complexity. So when you have emerging technology companies like ZeroEyes, like facial recognition companies, or you have sound intelligent companies, or you have LiDAR companies, whatever it may be, some companies prefer to go direct to consumer. Why do they prefer that? Well, some of it is because an integrator does not want to incorporate a SaaS model. Maybe some of it is, well, an integrator is not up to the level of expertise of that emerging technology, or it's too much of a lift for them to learn that technology. And third, maybe the manufacturer just wants to cut out the middleman and save the customer money and own the relationship. So my thoughts on this is, I've talked about this before, software. I had an episode with Kieran Carroll of ZeroEyes. We talked about our software companies killing security integrators. Kieran brings a great point in this topic. It was a really good discussion. Go check that out that episode. But what I firmly believe is dinosaurs in the security industry are prohibiting manufacturers to incorporating a SaaS or subscription model or recurring revenue model 100%. It's not fully incorporated into, I think, the industry. I think we're almost there. I think it's definitely heavy, but it's not fully accepted because old school generations favor a different model. And I get it when it comes around things like a pandemic that has to affect funding and budget cycles and layoffs and priorities. But I talk about this too, is like, where does security typically fall in an organization on that list, on that cutoff list? Typically, sometimes, but typically, not all the time, but typically, it's the first thing to get cut off. First thing to say, yep, not going to do that because it's a recurring piece. It's a recurring revenue model. And the integrator at the end of the day doesn't really care because he's like, well, I can just make money off my box sell, right? I can sell more cameras for a one-time cost. I can sell my service. I can sell my VMS, my access control, yada, yada, yada. I can sell a couple keypads or whatever it may be. That's a box sale. And what I've seen in my experience is I see a lot of manufacturers going direct because they can control that sales cycle. The dinosaurs in this space are saying, nope, this is my customer. I've worked with the customer for 20 plus years. Like, if you want to want to have this customer, you got to go through me. Dude, no, that's BS. A customer dictates the sales cycle. A customer will always dictate the sales cycle. The proper thing here is to educate that customer on what is evolving and changing, and how it can benefit their organization, whether it's a SaaS model, whether it's something else, or a new product, whether it's a personnel change, whatever it may be, right? But I hate the philosophy in this industry that says generations, especially the 20 plus year generations, the dinosaurs that say this model is not going to be fully incorporated, or have that mentality in place. Well, you know what? If it doesn't fit my line item, it's going to be the first thing that cuts off, or I'm going to make sure that it's the first thing they get cut off, because all I care about is getting that sale, not on your product, whatever else I can sell the customer that's not a SaaS or recurrent revenue model. Again, I'm not saying all people are like this, but the old school generation in this industry has to accept the technology, has to accept the change, has to accept that complexity in this space if we're going to continue to thrive as an ecosystem here in the space. A dinosaur can be offensive to some people, but you know what? My dad's a dinosaur. My dad's been in this space for 20 plus years. You think he's stuck in his ways and complacent? No, he's added a level of complexity. He's been flexible with the change. So when I talk about order versus complexity, the order concept is a story I always like to tell, is that Blockbuster story. Everyone remembers Blockbuster in the 90s. I was a kid, as a young kid, going to a Blockbuster on a Friday or Saturday to get the latest video game or the latest movie was the thing to do back in that era, right? You get to go down the aisles, you pick out the game, you pick out the movie, whatever it may be. You go back to the front desk, they put the disc in the box for you. Then you walk out the store, and you typically have a week to return the movie or game. Well, if you don't return it in that way, then you have a late fee, right? Blockbuster charge you a late fee. Blockbuster thrived. Man, it was like the nostalgia, man. They thrived for like 10, 12 plus years, but then they went out of business. And why did they go out of business? It's because they had too much order and not enough complexity. What I mean by that is old Netflix came along, right? On demand movies, on demand shows, just providing that next level of evolution in that sector. And what's funny about this is Netflix actually went to Blockbuster and asked to, I believe they asked them to be acquired, like Blockbuster to acquire Netflix. Blockbuster turned them down. They said, no, we're gonna do what we've always have done because it works. Well, it worked for a couple more years and they went out of business, right? Now, I'm not saying that was the dumbest decision or the smartest decision. I'm sure Blockbuster C-suite made a shit ton of money, but they also lost a bunch of money in the expansion path or the potential path with acquiring a company like Netflix. And so when that complexity element comes into play, is good and bad, right? You can have too much order, you can have too much complexity. Finding the middle of the road, that balance between the two is kind of the key. So when I talk about complexity, the story I like to tell is being a former college football player is a defensive end. I always talk about this, is defensive end, your role is typically broken down to three typical responsibilities. So one of the responsibilities would go sack the quarterback, one is go set the edge, and then a third responsibility would go dropping the flat. Well, if my responsibility on one single play is to set the edge, let's say I have to make sure the running back doesn't get outside of me. I got to set the perimeter, set the boundary. Well, during that play before the quarterback hikes it, maybe the linebacker behind me says, hey, Leo, Roger, or whatever form he's thinking of, which tells me, hey, I have to run a stunt now. I'm not going to set the edge. I'm actually going to run a stunt with my defensive tackle next to me and do that play. So I had to pivot a layer of complexity. And maybe this is done because coach in the press box sees a certain form, sees trips to the left side, has two running backs in the backfield. Whatever it may be, he sees some formation. He wants us to pivot and change. Same thing can be applied on the offensive side. Peyton Manning always threw audibles, right? He always threw audibles every single play. And that's what he was great at, right? Because sometimes he would make an audible. It'll be a touchdown, it'll be a 50-yard pass, it'll be 25-year-old run. Sometimes he would throw too much audibles or try to audible way too much. It would prevent him from actually moving down the ball down the field. So the complexity element in this is finding that healthy balance between both order and complexity to be successful. Dinosaurs in this space, I think, fall on that order side too much sometimes. They need to add a layer of complexity into their sales cycle, into their model, into how they actually transition and evolve and excel in the space. One of the biggest things I've learned, at least in my career so far, is like, and especially in football, and then transitioning now to the sales world here, or my career now in the industry, is the areas that created the most discomfort for me or made me feel the most uncomfortable are the areas that I thrived in. And I hate talking about myself, but it's like, I'm not a podcast professional. I just do this on the side because I actually enjoy it and I love talking to people. I love talking about cool shit. We have some cool shit. And I also like exposing the shit that's not cool, the shit that doesn't work. I find fun in that. But I'm not a professional. I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm not a $1 million podcaster guy. I got started my podcast with a mic, right? Amazon mic for $100 out of my garage. I'm just doing this on the side, having some fun. So at the end of the day, I think you incorporate both order and complexity in some form or way. Having too much of one over the other is not ideal, something I would not recommend. But at the end of the day, you control your business how you want to control it. And the dinosaurs in this space that have been stuck in their ways are stuck in their ways. They're complacent. I'm going to clash with some of them, and that's fine. They probably clash with me too, or they think my podcast is a joke, which is fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I really don't care. So it's funny. I enjoy the feedback I get. I enjoy the thought leadership or the discussions I have with other individuals around this space. And again, I enjoy the process of being here, or having this opportunity to speak with you all and host this discussion and host my podcast in the space. So kudos to IPVM for hosting this discussion and this poll. We'll see how the poll ends up at the end of the week. I'm looking forward to seeing how this kind of shapes out. But in the meantime, if you have comments or questions or concerns, you can email me at info@securityvip.net. Once again, that's info@securityvip.net. I do post my episodes on YouTube. You can watch the video recording of this. Or if you're on the road and you want to tune in, you can listen to it on Spotify. And for all the recent announcements and features about my podcast series, you can find that on LinkedIn at the SecurityVIP Podcast LLC on my LinkedIn page. Last thing I want to say is I have a panel discussion again at ISC West 2022. I was fortunate to be accepted to host another panel discussion at ISC West. A huge shout out to the organization as well as SIA. I loved that conference. It's a huge conference for our industry, and obviously transitions and pivots to kind of what's working, what's not, what we all need to hear and see. But for this discussion, I'm going to be talking about the evolution in gaming. So I'm going to feature some key end users in this space from multiple states. So looking forward to releasing that information and who those panelists are. Probably before the end of the year, I'll make an announcement of who those panelists are. But good opportunity to come back at that show and kind of highlight some more individuals, as well as talk about how gaming has changed from a security perspective in that casino kind of level set environment. But other than that, you guys stay tuned. Make sure to reach out if you guys want to have your company featured on an episode. Always love sponsors. Always love speaking with more people. And you guys stay safe out there. Cheers.
Better recognize you want to talk.